started looking at self-compassion, trauma, how trauma affects us, all of these things that we don't really talk about in medicine. And simultaneously, I was exploring psychedelic therapy. And it was through my own field research that I became extremely curious as to how can we use this in the existing paradigm? How can we usher in a new one as well?
Psychedelics are said to shift our fixed perspectives, giving us a bird's eye view of our own lives and helping to remove the lenses of cultural, religious, and social conditioning through which we are taught to see the world. They are being used therapeutically and somatically to treat depression, addiction, PTSD, and trauma, and many are using them to explore the ineffable, those unknown realms of consciousness and beyond. Join us in Adventures of the Psyche as we learn how psychedelics have transformed people's lives. Welcome, friends, to Adventures of the Psyche. Today we are joined by Dr. Julia Mirer, who shares how a psilocybin experience helped her recognize she didn't want to be a doctor in the medical system as it currently stands. A little bit about Julia. She received her medical degree from Ross University and was in her second year of pediatric residency in Harlem, New York City, when she realized that she's not buying what she's selling. Seeing the pitfalls of current healthcare systems, she decided to shift gears to explore transformative medicine, where she has found her calling in advocacy and education. Dr. Mirer is a consultant in the emerging field of psychedelic medicine, serving as a bridge between Eastern and Western practices, committing to merging the two in order to help create a new paradigm for integrative health and wellness.
Since age 7, I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help people. My father was a doctor. I saw him doing what he did. He would always tell me about, the perks of being a doctor. And so, I followed that path. And much to my surprise, when I finally got to my residency, the system wasn't what I imagined. And I, was too busy during my intern year working 80-hour weeks to really notice anything. And I was high on being a doctor. You're fresh out, but second year rolled around and I started to get one weekend here and there to sit with my thoughts and really think about what am I doing. And one of the things I noticed was that I'm losing myself. I'm no longer this bubbly person. I'm starting to get cold. I'm starting to get isolated. I had social anxiety for the first time in my life. And in August 2017, shortly after the solar eclipse, I ended up calling out of work saying that, you know what, this isn't viral. I think that I'm having a psychological breakdown and I actually need my vacation to start right now. And that vacation turned into a 6-week leave of absence, during which I started therapy. And bless my therapist, she said, you know what, I'd only want you on these medications until you're done with residency. And I said, you know what, I got this. I could do this. I went back and it was good. I was able to, manage my emotions. I was better, had better sleep patterns, starting to work on all those things that were probably contributing to my mental health. And then I go on vacation and somebody who cares about me handed me a bag of mushrooms and said, I think you need this. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe, another recreational drug. Let me just take this, go to the beach. And it was just hours of seeing the ocean, the sky, the music. I heard music differently for the first time ever. This was the first time I really had a high dose trip. And again, didn't think anything of it, went back to residency a week later after my vacation was over. But something interesting happened. I became hyper aware of all the toxicity that I was around. Between the people that we work with, we're toxic to each other. It's competitive. Also in terms of, the interactions we have with our patients, maybe not toxic, but also not as productive as they could be. I started becoming very aware of how disconnected our treatment approach was. Mind, body, soul, forget about soul, but the mind and the body were completely separated. And I became so increasingly aware of the disconnect within the system that my therapist wanted to increase my medication and add another one. At this point, I told her, give me a week, because if this doctor who told me that she didn't want me on any meds in 2 years now wants to increase my dosing, maybe there's something else going on. And what happened that week was interesting because my whole narrative in my head was, how am I disappointing everyone if I resign? How am I disappointing my family? How am I disappointing my patients, my colleagues? All of the story. And one shift in the questions really kind of catapulted me into my new life, where I asked myself, instead of how am I disappointing everyone by leaving, I asked myself, how am I disappointing myself by staying? And from somewhere, I hear my soul scream, in every freaking way, Julia. And I joke that the mushrooms made me do it, because from that point on, I knew that the life that I was living was not the life that was for me. And unless I changed something drastically, I wasn't going to be okay. And that was 3.5 years ago. And when I left medicine, I didn't know where I was going. I knew that, we're working with half a toolbox and the tools we have aren't working, but what else is out there? So when I resigned, I started looking into alternative healing paths, Ayurvedic medicine, mindfulness-based stress reduction, started looking at self-compassion, trauma, how trauma affects us, all of these things that we don't really talk about in medicine. And simultaneously, I was exploring psychedelic therapy. And it was through my own field research that I became extremely curious as to how can we use this in the existing paradigm? How can we usher in a new one as well? And so that put me on this journey of exploration. I started reading everything I could. And I decided, you know what, I have a medical degree, and how can I leverage this to get my foot into doors that it doesn't belong in, to then speak to a subject in a way that resonates? Because at this point, I don't have a license to lose. So I could speak very openly about how I got here. And having this open dialogue has really allowed me to share my experiences, share what's happening in this industry with people who normally wouldn't listen. And it's been such a privilege to be able to do that, because for the first time in a very long time, I'm fully buying what I'm selling. And I am proud to be an advocate for this, because I truly think that this is what we collectively need, between what's happening with mental health crisis, with addiction, and just the overall state of our healthcare system. I think that this is an opportunity for us to really create the change that we need.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much, Julia. So I'm curious if there's one thing you wish was suddenly universal knowledge amongst the medical field that you've learned in your exploration since that psilocybin journey, what would it be?
That the true gift of psychedelics is to remind us of what we're capable of.
Cool. Okay.
Well, the reason I say that is because, people talk about how we can get to some of these states that we experience on the psychedelic through other means, meditation, breath work, but it's very difficult to know where you're going if you haven't been there before. So the psychedelic gives you kind of a peek behind the door, and then it's up to us to be curious enough to figure out how can we get there without it. And this can be about a high dose trip with, the visuals and all of that. And it could also be with microdosing, where the microdose can just remind you that you have the choice to pause between a trigger and a reaction. You have the choice to let a depressive thought ruin your day. Just remembering that you have that choice, that can be something that you try to achieve on a regular day-to-day basis as well, without anything.
So I think it's pretty interesting that your psilocybin journey was somewhat uneventful. When people are having wild visuals and huge epiphanies, sounds like it was kind of quiet, but things still had a big change afterwards, and you did end up having some shifts. It just didn't happen while you were on the medicine. What sense making have you made of that?
Well, one, that the mushrooms give you whatever you're ready for. So maybe I wasn't ready for any big visuals or major epiphanies, because that wasn't what I needed. And I think what I really needed was to connect back to my intuition, because all of these symptoms that I had was my soul screaming that this isn't right. And I wasn't paying attention. I was masking it with one thing or another. So I think that experience, it gave me whatever fun the beautiful visuals that I did see. But what it was really doing was kind of peeling away the layers that were preventing me from hearing what's being asked of me.
Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me here.